Brian Walshe's murder trial, and we got to hear all of the places that investigators found his deceased wife's DNA. Brian is accused of killing his wife, lying to police, and then disposing of his wife's body in various dumpsters across eastern Massachusetts. And he has pled guilty to everything except the murder, so let's get into the DNA evidence. The week of his wife's disappearance, Brian is all over town putting heavy bags into dumpsters at various apartment buildings and stores. For example, this is a liquor store, and there he is at an apartment building. And one of the places that Brian surreptitiously tried to throw away trash was the dumpster at his mother's apartment complex. And the contents of this dumpster are the only trash bags that were recovered of the maybe 5 or 6 dumpsters that Brian visited. The dumpster had actually already even been loaded into a trash truck, but they were able to track down the trash truck, and that's how they found these 10 bags worth of evidence. I'm sorry I made this text so small. I'll make it bigger next time. Before this evidence came in, there was a stipulation that Brian and Anna actually already gave DNA samples in 2018. Brian had been arrested in connection with the art fraud. I don't know why Anna would have given a sample too, but it looks like that is the sample that they used to check all the other samples against. And every single item where they actually tested for DNA as opposed to just blood, they found DNA on all items that were actually tested for DNA. And everything in pink is something that tested positive for Anna's DNA. Some bloody towels that I cannot show you because it's honestly very gruesome. Brian Walshe's dark gray slippers, which had a lot of bloody material on the exterior. I am going to show a couple of these items in grayscale, so this is your warning about that. Again, this is in grayscale, black and white, so you will not see any color. But these are the slippers that were recovered from the trash. Presumably they're Brian's slippers because a pair of ladies' slippers were also recovered. These tested positive for both Anna's DNA and Brian's DNA, and then a third unknown contributor. This column here is the number of contributors that they found on each item, and then whether or not male DNA was present. They're just basically testing for a Y chromosome. And then they tested if Anna was a match, and then separately tested if Brian was a match. There's also this carpet, which I'm again showing you in grayscale, but I want you to see the quantity of the biological material here. They cut a piece of this rug out, and this is the sample they tested. Once again with Anna's DNA on it, but this time it did not have Brian's DNA. 30 nonillion times more likely to be Anna than an unknown or unrelated person. They also took 3 samples from the Tyvek suit. Some were interior, some were exterior. They found Brian Walshe's DNA on the interior of the cuff of the sleeve, and Anna Walshe's DNA on the exterior and also inside part of another sleeve. They also found Anna's DNA on the blade and the handle of this hacksaw, and on the head and handle of this hatchet. And also her DNA was found on this part of the basement floor, which also tested positive for blood. The only item that exclusively had Brian's DNA on it was this piece of gauze that also had tape on it. You can pause to read this if you want. Before we got to the conclusion of the DNA evidence today, there were a lot of witnesses that may have seemed less important, but I think this trial has been a great example of how they have to lay out a foundation for evidence to come in. We had to hear all about the well-being check, the consent search, the warrant search, extraction and analysis of the location data, the actual finding of the dumpster. A crime scene services person came in and photographed all of the evidence to document it. Then another person comes and takes possession of the evidence to take it to the crime lab where it can be swabbed. And then those swabs are sent for DNA analysis, which takes these 4 steps. And in this case, for one item, one person might be doing the extraction and the amplification, and another person is doing the quantification and the detection. And that was true for literally every single one of these individual samples. And that's why we had so much testimony today of people being like, well, I'm the one that did the extraction, then I handed it off to this person, and then she did the quantification. Because court would not work if a witness could just come in and go, I did the DNA testing, no, I didn't do the swabs, no, I didn't do anything else, but you should trust me. At the beginning of court today, we resumed the cross-examination of Matthew Sheehan from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. And today the pieces really started to fall into place for me on what the prosecution wants the jury to believe. Brian Walshe's lawyer asked if anybody had searched for blood in the living room of the Walshe residence. And Sheehan said that he did a visual search for blood, but he didn't actually test any areas because he didn't find any areas worth testing. And so Tipton is basically like, no blood in the living room, interesting. And then later Tipton's like, you also didn't see any blood spatter, right? Like you would have seen blood spatter if, I don't know, somebody stabbed somebody with a knife and then pulled the knife out and blood flew off of it. And he was like, yeah, we didn't see blood spatter. And I think Walshe's counsel is trying to get ahead of what the prosecution wants the jury to believe. Look at me and understand me. I am not saying that the Commonwealth has proven this yet at all. I am saying I think this is where they are leading us. This is what I think the Commonwealth is trying to convince the jury, that Brian stabbed Anna in the living room with a knife from the kitchen. Why do I think they're leading us there? They showed us this cut that Brian got on his thumb. We don't know when this happened. We don't know where it came from. We do know that bloody gauze and tape with Brian's DNA on it were recovered among all of the other trash found with Anna's stuff. And we know that in the afternoon of January 1st, Brian went out and bought band-aids and antibacterial ointment. And that purchase occurred before any purchase of the cutting tools that Brian later acquired to dispose of Anna's remains, which means he can't have cut himself with one of those cutting tools. We also have Brian buying the new rug. Today they showed evidence of Brian going to Home Goods to purchase rugs and also scented candles. Somebody asked in my live stream today why the babysitter wouldn't have smelled anything, and Brian was doing a lot of stuff to try to cover any smells in the house. He was searching about smells a lot, and then he purchased, I think this is like 3 or 4 candles, including this one, which I only looked up because it was called Bone Mango Tangerine. We already know what the rug looks like in Anna and Brian's living room because Anna had posted this clip to her social media. And it's still from this clip that features the floor and Anna but not any of the kids was shown to jurors in court today. So the jurors know that the original living room rug is this one, which is the same rug that was found in the dumpster at Brian's mother's apartment complex. And we know that Brian bought this new rug on the 2nd and replaced the existing rug before police could ever search the home. There's also this knife that was found in Brian's kitchen that has tested positive for blood. This chef's knife was found loose in this kitchen cabinet above the refrigerator on top of some liquid ant bait, next to some other items that Brian had purchased for the disposal of Anna. That's hydrogen peroxide and hydrogen peroxide wipes. We know from previous testimony that the friend that Anna and Brian had over that evening, Jem, he had texted Brian a couple days later and was like, the food was amazing and so was the company. Jem had said that Brian had prepared this elaborate meal for them. Jem is coming in for a voir dire tomorrow morning. I don't know what for. I am wondering if they're going to ask him if the knife was out. Did you see the knife? Could be totally unrelated. I don't know. Truthfully, the biggest reason that I think this is what the Commonwealth wants the jury to believe is that the Commonwealth has to prove premeditation. Brian is charged with first-degree murder, and there's only a couple avenues to get there in Massachusetts. There is premeditated first-degree murder, murder with extreme atrocity or cruelty, and also there's like murder while doing another crime that could result in a certain whatever. The Commonwealth is arguing that he planned this all out in advance. Trying to prove the extreme atrocity and cruelty would probably be actually harder because you have to prove that the atrocity and cruelty was happening at the moment of the killing, as opposed to after. I think it's pretty obvious some atrocious and cruel things were happening afterwards. But in terms of premeditation, they don't have to think that far in advance about it. They just need a long enough time for a moment of reflection. Let's say, for example, you come home with a bottle of wine in your hand, you can't wait to celebrate with your partner, you walk into your house and you see them cheating on you with somebody else. If in that split second you take that bottle of wine and you hit them over the head and kill them, that is not first-degree murder, that is not premeditation. Even though you did decide in that split second to do it, there was no moment of reflection. If you take the same story, you still walk in, you still see the cheating, and you leave, you go to your car, you get a weapon out of your car, then you return to the house and use that weapon on them. That is first-degree murder because there was a moment of reflection. It doesn't matter how long it is, but it has to have been an opportunity to change your mind. As always, I'm not a lawyer. This is just my best understanding of this stuff. And if the prosecution can convince the jury that Brian killed Anna in the living room with a weapon that he had to go retrieve from another room, I could be so wrong about what they want the jury to understand. This is just what I think right at this exact moment. That's everything for today. Love you guys. Drink water. Bye.